There have been incredible developments in the Russian-Ukrainian war in recent days. Putin doesn't know what to do anymore. The Russian invasions on the territory of Ukraine have begun to be repelled one by one. The ammunition shipment train, which was seen as Putin's last hope, was neutralized by the Ukrainian army, and by adding the ammunition contained in it to its inventory, it caused the Russian forces to fight against their own weapons. This success of the Ukrainian army has caused a great echo around the world. A new one has recently been added to the successful operations of the Ukrainian forces. The concentration of the Russian army in the Bahkmut region has taken a big hit. This time, the train belonging to the Russian army carrying ammunition and military equipment to the fronts where hot clashes were ongoing was completely neutralized by the operation of Ukrainian forces. As for the details of the operation, with this operation, the Ukrainian forces ensured that the soldiers in the Bahkmut region remained completely unarmed and prevented future attacks on the Ukrainian side. The Russian military is sending weapons, ammunition, and military equipment to many regions through Crimea. At this point, the Russian army could not meet this request. It is a well-known fact that a large amount of weapons and ammunition are found in the Crimean region, which is considered the main center of many fronts. The recent heavy losses of the Russian army have caused the ammunition depots in Crimea to be emptied a lot. However, Russian leader Vladimir Putin, who knew that he could no longer bear to take any more defeats, decided to set off the shipment train, which he saw as the last hope for achieving definitive success in the Bama region. It is a well-known fact throughout the world that soldiers fighting on hot fronts in the Bahkmut region are suffering from ammunition shortages. The fact that the Ukrainian forces also organized such a large operation caused the Russian army to see the bottom in terms of ammunition and weapons. The Ukrainian forces were carrying out one of the reconnaissance flights that they organize around the clock. Unmanned aerial vehicles with advanced technology have detected something incredible on their last reconnaissance flight. The human air vehicle, which was traveling from high altitudes, noticed that there was some activity in the ammunition depots located in Crimea. After this detection, the unmanned aerial vehicle, which informed the Ukrainian headquarters, continued its reconnaissance trip in the region, noticing that the ammunition depot was empty within a short time. It was noticed that the unmanned aerial vehicle weapons and ammunition were taken to the train belonging to the Russian army in the Crimea region by trucks. It was at this point that the intelligence of the unmanned aerial vehicle activated the Ukrainian forces. After the filling process of the shipment train belonging to the Russian army was completely completed, it began to take action. Unmanned aerial vehicles, which detected the route it was traveling, noticed that the train was moving towards Bahkmut direction. The Ukrainian forces, who have begun preparations for a major operation, have decided to use remote-controlled explosives in this operation. Having determined the most suitable location for the operation, the Ukrainian forces began to place the explosives one by one on the train tracks. The Ukrainian forces, who will not suffer any harm thanks to the remote-controlled explosives, began to withdraw to a sufficient distance after placing the explosives. The Ukrainian forces, who learned that they would be in the region in a short time with the incoming intelligence, began a patient wait. The Ukrainian soldiers standing in the area in a completely camouflaged way could tell by the trembling of the ground that the train was coming. A significant convergence of the train prompted the Ukrainian forces to activate. As soon as the train reached the area, large explosion sounds were heard. The two wagons in front of the train, which provided the command, were completely neutralized by the explosion. The train cars in the back and where the ammunition was found got off the tracks and stuck in the ground. With the cessation of explosions, Ukrainian forces mobilized and one by one neutralized the Russian soldiers who were inside the train cars and assigned to protect the ammunition. The Ukrainian forces who opened the carriage doors of the train could hardly believe their eyes. In this way, it was proved that a large amount of ammunition and weapons found inside the wagon went to the Bahkmut region. The Ukrainian forces who managed to load the seized ammunition and weapons onto their trucks without wasting time set off for their headquarters. The Ukrainian forces who did not want to leave anything belonging to the Russian army in the region also set fire to the cars that had not exploded and completely neutralized them. The Ukrainian troops who organized the operation, which was met with a great celebration, were not late in announcing these victories to the world. Unbelievable Ukrainian operation at Melitopol. The Russian airbase was destroyed. Putin is furious over the loss of his final stronghold in this region. The Ukrainian military then sent bombers to Melitopol. Russia's dearth of response to this operation stunned everyone. However, the clever aspects of this operation resonated throughout the world. Russia during the final days of the Ukrainian war, when the Ukrainian army maintained a commanding advantage, it became evident that Russia was in dire straits in spite of the fact that the Ukrainian army outperforms Russia in every way. Russia has no authority over the ongoing operation. Everyone who learnt of the Ukrainian forces' subsequent action was stunned. Putin's threats against those who recently supported Ukraine have brought the global community to its knees. Recently, the already elevated level of concern regarding Russia has increased considerably. Putin targeted nations that promised to increase Ukraine's assistance. Consequently, international organizations have begun to plan major actions against Putin. This exemplary effort has demonstrated once again that Ukraine's assistance was not futile. This most recent Russian military setback has demonstrated to the entire world that Russia has reclaimed complete dominance in the region, even though the Ukraine's primary objective is to repel Russian soldiers within its borders. Recapturing Crimea is one of its most important objectives. Multiple times, the Ukrainian military has expressed concern for Crimea in retaliation for Russia's illegitimate invasion of this territory in 2014. Zelensky has announced that enormous actions will be taken to reclaim this territory. When he blew up the Kerch Bridge, he demonstrated the gravity of the operations once more. Nevertheless, with this decisive maneuver, the Ukrainian army has rendered the Russian Air Force almost inoperable. A crucial element of this operation was the fact that Russia did not anticipate such an enormous operation. However, Ukraine's actions to date have been genuinely remarkable. The Ukrainian military discovered that all explosives in the vicinity of Melitopol were carried out by aircraft departing from this region. Upon hearing this, he immediately dispatched flag officers to investigate the presence of assault weapons in this area. After undertaking extensive reconnaissance and intelligence gathering in this region, the Bayraktars discovered that the military airfield was not adequately protected. Putin chose the most inexperienced and newest personnel for this region due to the length of time this territory has been occupied. He believed that the Ukrainian military would not have access to this territory until today. Nonetheless, just as the Ukrainian army has made substantial gains in other areas, it has now handed Putin another stunning setback. The Ukrainian military has deciphered the communication network of the Russian military airport after learning that it could direct jets anywhere in this region. The Ukrainian military sent an emergency signal to the planes alleging it originated from Moscow. This enabled the aircraft to intervene directly while Ukrainian flag officers were sent to the region. Due to this military airstrip's continuous existence, the Kremlin has recently removed it from the range of its air defense systems. Recognizing an opening, the Ukrainian army decided with the assistance of the flag officers to conquer this region. The flag bearers were dispatched here. Given that the Ukrainian army had few vehicles in this region, the flag officers were presented with a unique opportunity. The bombardment of the military installation that houses Russia's aircraft has commenced. The fact that the Ukrainian military was the first to target the communication network's location ensured that Russia was unaware of these actions. In addition, he dropped 3 pyrotechnics in rapid succession with flag bearers. As soon as the terrain of the landing zone was detonated, the Russian military headquarters were obliterated. The Russian army was compelled to withdraw from the area because of its inability to respond, knowing that a large number of missiles, explosives, and bombs compatible with Russian aircraft were located within the base where the aircraft were located. The Ukrainian army deployed a large number of additional devices to detonate this location. The Ukrainian army was unable to cause the anticipated quantity of damage because it was unable to reach the required location. In response, Russian warplanes approached the area. Upon receiving this information, the Ukrainian army realized it had only one option for Bayraktars committed suicide during this 15-member Bayraktar mission. These kamikaze attacks occurred precisely where the Russian airbase's explosives were located. Immediately following this incident, a massive explosion shook Melitopol. When the remaining Bayraktars returned to their homeland, they found that the military airport had been completely destroyed by the advent of Russian aircraft. Upon hearing this from Russian pilots, Putin exploded with rage. The Ukrainian army held a massive celebration after destroying the planes that were the backbone of these assaults. Putin, however, did not fare so well. Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, has recently begun to confront significant obstacles. Putin, recognizing that he has lost the support of the people, has taken control of the nation on his own terms. This regime's total lack of benefits has nearly driven the Russian populace insane. Diverse organizations have been organizing rallies and gathering signatures in support of peace with Ukraine. While the Russian people continue their efforts to overthrow their government, Putin revealed that he mimed every individual who collected signatures. As a result of these confessions, Putin's rule over this region is once more understandable. The oppressive culture of Russia has penetrated every corner of the country. Although Putin's fear of losing power is the underlying cause of the situation, those who have maintained him in power thus far lack patience. Putin, cognizant of the situation, not only persisted with his harsh methods, but also activated the team he had assembled to re-implement these harsh measures. This group, known as the National Guard, was established by Putin to crush anyone who opposes Putin's authority or opposes fighting in Ukraine. This facility houses an estimated 340,000 personnel. The most problematic aspect of this arrangement is that they only receive orders from one individual while they have no allegiance to the military and are known as Putin's personal militia. Therefore, if you challenge the government, you may be pursued by the National Guard. This crisis proves to the entire world that the National Guard is under extreme duress. This repressive factor has begun to limit many things in Russia, including press expression and media freedoms, as well as the right to vote and be elected. In contrast, these restrictions indicate a noteworthy occurrence to us. It is believed that this event indicates that Putin's presidency is approaching its end. Due to the fact that, like many dictators, when Putin realized he would lose power, he began to take actions that would lead to conflict by hardening his policies. Russians are reticent to take to the streets out of apprehension that these restrictions will be significantly tightened. A teenager who exclusively conveyed anti-Putin sentiments on social media was sentenced to 10 years in prison pending prosecution for her actions. Even though this scenario reverberated around the world, it was prohibited in Russia. In addition, it has been demonstrated yet again that corruption is pervasive in Russia. The only solution is a rapid transition in administration. The Russian National Republican Army has carried out an important maneuver. The Russian military has initiated an offensive against the Russian military. This Ukrainian ally has resolved to terminate the conflict. Effectively, this has encircled the Russian army. Putin's subsequent actions have had international consequences. Putin severely punished Russia during the final days of the Ukraine conflict. The action of the Ukrainian army astonished the Russian forces because Russia has recently experienced the emergence of significant issues. Numerous Russian organizations are in crisis as a result of Putin's ineffectual policies. In spite of Putin's harsh measures against disgruntled citizen demonstrations, opposition organizations in Russia have strengthened. Even though the Russian army is comprised of numerous organizations, these formations have grown more formidable as casualties have increased. Putin was, in fact, confronted with a far more significant problem. Ukraine has begun to acquire an additional advantage in addition to those it has recently obtained. The Russian National Republican Army then took decisive action. This group, which opposes Putin's authority, is believed to deliver freedom to Russia. This group decided to pursue an innovative strategy to remove Putin from power. It is envisaged that this will be feasible as a result of the Ukrainian army's war victory. In order to advance, this rebel organization has enlisted the Ukrainian army. The Russian National Republican Army has made life a living nightmare for Russian forces in this region. The Russian military is undergoing a dire crisis. After this crisis, the tense atmosphere within the Russian military began to manifest itself in all operations after the participation of the Russian National Republican Army. The Ukrainian army was astonished by a new decision. After defecting, a significant number of Chechen soldiers joined the Ukrainian military. Sheikh Mansour Battalion is the name of the battalion where these Chechen soldiers are stationed. After achieving these victories, the Ukrainian army proceeded to succeed in all scheduled operations against Russia. As a result of the abrupt transfer of Russia's most important military units to the Ukrainian side, in response to these recent conflicts, the Ukrainian military has decided to conduct a previously unheard-of operation in Kharkiv. The Ukrainian military has decided to utilize the intelligence these organizations possess as a result of these recent military contributions. Every secret plot of the Russian army has been revealed. Due to the numerous security defects of the Russian personnel stationed in Kharkiv, the Ukrainian military came close to scoring a direct hit, and the Russian soldiers were astounded by what was expected of them in this region. The Ukrainian military started to employ a significant number of Russian National Republican Army and Chechen Sheikh Mansour Battalion soldiers. These organizations have established a presence in this region. The Russian army has been effectively encircled by these rebel factions, engaged in combat with Ukrainian soldiers as they believed there would be no operation to Kharkiv. Russian border police have neglected their duties due to the subsequent success of the Ukrainian uprising. There is no longer a solitary Russian military element in Kharkiv. This territory was infiltrated covertly by the Ukrainian army. Recognizing that a significant number of Russian forces were being moved from this region to the fighting in Bahkmut and Soledar, Ukrainian soldiers employed long-barreled weapons to impede the troop movement. Ukraine had a significant advantage in this regard. The Russian military had dealt with a considerable number of domestic military mobilizations. After that, the Ukrainian army's seasoned combatants delivered a crushing blow to Russia. Due to this rebellion, the Russian military is incapable of recovering. The Russian soldiers who didn't even know how to carry a rifle were left to deal with a difficult situation on their own. The Ukrainian operation was a resounding success in a relatively short period of time, and the Russian army capitulated swiftly. Nonetheless, this operation was not simple. It was regarded as one of Ukraine's most significant attacks against Russia. As a result of mounting defeats, discontent developed within the Russian military. This allowed a significant number of Russian soldiers to rebel against Putin within the army. Putin's deposition is imminent if the current trend persists. However, the actions of the Ukrainian army could send Russia into a tailspin. However, the primary challenge at this time is ensuring that a substantial portion of the population organizes against itself in response to Putin's egregiously unjustified actions. Putin has been designated as the primary source of the Ukrainian war's problems. Putin has been in power for nearly 30 years. However, There have been numerous instances of inadequate management as the Soviet Union and succeeding years of the Russian Federation were marked by numerous coup attempts. The Russian army was subject to a massive purge. Consequently, the Russian army, during the time of the Red Army, lost all of its vigor. Nevertheless, the Russian army confronted an even greater obstacle. This plan to eradicate the Russian military is documented. Putin has taken a number of steps to limit the expansion of the army. Putin's actions have jeopardized the Russian military in a number of areas. The accumulation of reactions against Putin has substantially impeded the development of the Russian military. Putin nevertheless made substantial progress by not abandoning his principles in the early stages of these victories. He also rendered decisive decisions on the Ukrainian front. The Russian military has begun to encounter significant difficulties due to these issues. The Ukrainian army will exert significant pressure on Russia. In recent days, Sergei Surovikin, who was regarded as the Ukrainian military superior, was dismissed in opposition to this action. Ukrainian soldiers exerted significant pressure on the Russian army. Nonetheless, everyone is baffled by the incident at the core of this impeachment. Recent difficulties Russia has encountered are widely acknowledged. However, the Russian people's economic difficulties established seeds of doubt in their minds regarding the Kremlin. Alongside this mistrust, certain Russian military factions are now populated by soldiers advocating for a change in leadership. Sergei Surovikin has been determined to be the most distinguished of these combatants. It compelled Russia to give up a number of advantages it had previously acquired. Putin has begun to act because Sergei Surovikin has been in contact with Wagner, founding CEO Yevgeny Prigozhin, for a number of years. Fear has begun to spread throughout the populace. Prigozhin was viewed as an alternative to Putin, which was the essence of this idea. Numerous individuals believe Putin will lose power if he continues to act in this manner. As a result, Ukrainian personnel have participated in a variety of activities as a result of operatives in Russia. He gained knowledge of Putin's perspective. Nevertheless, the Ukrainian army continued to develop and preserve its advantages. In response, however, the opinions of war analysts reverberated around the world. The Ukrainian army may be able to terminate the conflict within a few days, according to military analysts. In addition to this, Russia is expected to face significant obstacles. If Putin loses this battle, he will forfeit his authority. This meant that instead of being prosecuted for his atrocities against Ukraine, Vladimir Putin would be punished. It is unclear how the Ukrainian army could achieve victory if it continues to operate in this manner, which creates numerous complications for Russian administrators. Nonetheless, Russian officials now favor Putin's continued rule as everyone awaits the Russians' next move. The Ukrainian army has begun preparations to end the conflict. The world admires Ukraine because it has established comprehensive dominance in the Donetsk region. Putin punished Russian soldiers who fled rather than combat the Russian army, which prefers to give up rather than fight. Has been rooted once more. The Ukrainian army, which has won decisive victories in all three regions, continues to expand. Rookie Russian soldiers chose to become prisoners rather than fight for the Russian army one by one. Russia's ambitions are being destroyed. While assistance to the Ukrainian army continues unabated, Russia's reputation continues to deteriorate year after year. European nations are delighted to see that their assistance has not been wasted, as demonstrated by the Ukrainian army's remarkable achievements. As a consequence, when a mutual sense of gratification develops, the country's relations with Ukraine grow stronger by the day. Russia, on the other hand, is losing ground daily in this conflict, which it began with great vigor. In addition, he did not anticipate such a massive army opposing Russia. Russia anticipated that you would triumph by completely occupying Ukraine within a few weeks, but he did not anticipate that the entire world would support Ukraine by exhibiting an internationally admired political stance. Ukraine has begun to reap the benefits of its close relationships with other nations after commencing to repel Russian forces in more than half of its occupied territory. The Ukraine is on the verge of victory in some areas. Russia has begun to transition from an offensive to a defensive posture. The fact that Russia has adopted a defensive posture in a country it occupied as an occupying force demonstrates how dire Russia's situation has become. Moscow's incursion into Ukraine's territory has been a source of concern for the Russian leadership in recent days. In contrast, the current assault in the Ukrainian city of Malinovka has placed significant strain on the Russian military. The Ukraine's plan to retake the territory and deal Russia's forces a heavy blow was more successful than anticipated. From a technical standpoint, this region would provide Ukraine with significant benefits. Since assuming control of the territory, the Russian army has taken every precaution to prevent Ukraine from re-entering as a result of vigilant surveillance. The Ukrainian army was able to identify the Russian army's weaknesses and defeat the soldiers in the region. The Ukrainian military initiated a military offensive to seize the regional headquarters by pressing the button. According to this strategy, the Ukrainian army would surprise the Russian army, secure the headquarters, and compel the Russian army to respond. It had already been established that the region's army consisted of Chechen males. As a consequence, the attack on the Chechen army proceeded according to plan, shocking the Chechen soldiers with what they had experienced. Consequently, the unable to respond soldiers began to flee in all directions. Upon observing this, the Ukrainian soldiers executed the fleeing soldiers. In this battle, many soldiers were killed, but many more were captured and interrogated. This resulted in the loss of many Russian soldiers in an already challenging situation. It would be fascinating to see how Russia, which has had difficulty replacing fallen soldiers, closes this void in the region of Kramatorsk. Another incident occurred. The Ukraine, which had planned a significantly more aggressive strategy in this region, has once again executed a successful operation. It was determined that the soldiers in the region were actually ignorant civilians. This information originated from the highly sophisticated surveillance apparatus Israel supplied to Ukraine. Following the collection of all available intelligence, the Ukrainian army launched a tremendous assault against the Russian soldiers. The Ukrainian army surprised the objective by dropping bombs from the opposite direction of where they were about to launch their assault. The Russian soldiers who pointed their muzzles in this direction did not anticipate a counterattack. The Russian soldiers who had been ambushed from behind were stunned by their ordeal. The Russian army, which had assumed complete dominance in this region and had not anticipated such a large-scale operation, attempted to take refuge in areas that would be secure from large-scale shock attacks. The soldiers were constrained to surrender peacefully after realizing they would be unable to defend their headquarters against the thrown balls. These men, who had already been drawn into the conflict and possessed limited knowledge of the topic, were subdued without much resistance. Putin erupted in rage when he discovered that the headquarters had suffered extensive damage due to a lack of soldiers. Russia is constrained to incorporate mercenaries into its army by publishing advertisements everywhere. Additionally, numerous personnel are dying daily. The fact that the Russian army suffered casualties in both of these locations was viewed as a stunning loss. The absence of casualties in the Ukrainian army during the transfer of tanks and equipment from the Russian army to the Ukrainian army reaffirmed the Ukrainian army's strength. Russian forces have been expelled from the majority of the Donetsk region by Ukraine, which previously freed the Lyman region from Russian occupation. Efforts by Ukraine to attain complete independence in the region have manifestly begun to bear fruit, although it appears that the Ukrainian army is fighting bravely and gaining vigor from incoming aid. There is another explanation for this. This is as a result of the fact that the majority of Russian soldiers are untrained civilians. These individuals are Russian nationals who were sentenced to death against their will and left their families behind. Russia, which orchestrated the invasion with an unprecedented policy, is now enduring the brunt of the repercussions. On the other hand, there are Ukrainians who voluntarily join the military to reclaim their nation's sovereignty and protect it from invasion. Before being drafted into conflict, these citizens are taught by teams of exceptionally talented individuals from around the globe. We are aware, for instance, that the United Kingdom recently sent 200 personnel to Ukraine for instruction. However, due to poorly maintained armament, Russian soldiers suffer catastrophic losses even in training environments. Analysts of conflict have begun making unequivocal proclamations indicating that Putin will not continue this conflict due to the fact that Russia is presently involved in a violent conflict and a terrible political decline. On the other hand, Ukraine's political ties with other nations are possibly the most crucial factor in its victory. While Putin continually issues threats and launches attacks against all nations, Ukraine works to strengthen relations. Thus, he obtains the support of Ukraine and nations that have developed strong relations with him, as well as nations that want Putin to be recognized as Russia's adversary. As a consequence of the conflicts, numerous trade agreements with Russia have been suspended, leaving it in dire economic straits. However, the Ukraine is bridging the equipment deficit by incorporating the equipment lost by Russia into its own framework. The reason why this is so straightforward is because the Ukraine forces Russian soldiers to surrender while seizing Russian headquarters. Ukraine is engaged in a significant conflict with the Russian military and has raised the white flag without destroying its headquarters. As a consequence, it causes no casualties within its own army and has access to the entire arsenal of the Russian army, despite the fact that these Ukrainian operations are proceeding according to plan. Putin is incensed that the Ukrainians have won so easily. Putin, who enjoys punishing his soldiers, is continually increasing the pressure on them. Putin, however, refuses to acknowledge that the primary cause of Russia's setbacks is already the strains on its armed forces.